My son kept my house as P&'s inheritance and kicked me out of the house, so I called a crane and did something he never imagined. But wait, before I tell you what I did as revenge, don't forget to leave a comment about where you're from. I love reading where our listeners are from and how far our stories reach around the world. The sound of the door slam still echoed in the air, a cold and metallic echo that tangled in the dusty furniture and faded curtains. It wasn't the slam of an argument, the kind that vibrates with rage and from which, sooner or later, you emerge to apologize with lowered eyes. No, this had been a definitive sound, a period made of solid oak and security lock, the sound of a door that wouldn't open again for me. I stood there on the porch, with my old and worn suitcase at my feet, like an abandoned dog. The worn fabric of my linen pants moved slightly in the evening breeze, a cruel contrast to the lead-like heaviness I felt in my bones. I breathed deeply, but the air smelled of freshly cut grass and rose bushes, the garden that Arturo, my husband, my life, and I had planted with so much love. Now it was just his house's garden. My son Daniel's house. "I'm sorry, Mother. Those are the lawyer's orders. The property is mine now. You have until the weekend to vacate." His words, spoken in a flat, bureaucratic voice, cut me like ice blades. Orders from the lawyer? Property? Vacate? These were contract terms, not words in a conversation between mother and son. Where was the child who climbed onto my lap crying over a scratch? The rebellious teenager I always waited for with a plate of hot food, no matter what time, the man I hugged on his father's funeral day, when his body shook with pain I thought we shared. I looked at the house's facade. Our house. Every crack in the plaster was a line in my palm. Known, beloved. The crooked attic window where the full moon crept in. The loose tile next to the gutter that Arturo always promised to fix and never did. It was imperfect, slowly crumbling, but it was ours. It was the container of an entire life, of laughter in the kitchen, silly fights in the living room. His first wobbling steps, Arturo's "I do" said with tears in his eyes, the dense and painful silence after he left. And now, they were kicking me out. My own son, my Daniel, over an inheritance, over papers and signatures. A warm moisture ran down my cheeks. It wasn't the dramatic crying from movies, but a silent one, of absolute defeat. The tears slid down the wrinkles that time, and Arturo's smile had carved into my face, salting my dry lips. I didn't wipe them away. What for? There was no one to see them. Daniel was inside, probably already measuring the walls to place his new flat-screen TV, erasing our trace. The sun began to tilt, weaving long purple shadows in the garden. Soon it would be night, and I had nowhere to go. My friends, all our age, were in nursing homes, enjoying their grandchildren's company, not picking up the pieces of their lives from the sidewalk. I had no siblings. Arturo was my everything. And when he left, Daniel became my anchor, until he decided to cut the rope. A dull, hot rage began to sprout from the bottom of my stomach, rising through my throat, drowning the sadness. No, it couldn't be. Not after everything. Not after years of caring for Arturo during his illness, of selling my jewelry to pay for experimental treatments, of sleeping in a chair next to his bed for months, holding his increasingly thin hand. Not after promising him, in a barely audible whisper the night before he died, that I would take care of Daniel, that I would keep the family together. Take care of our son Elena. Take care of our house. And this was taking care. Being thrown out like old furniture. I turned on my heels and looked at the suitcase. Inside were only cold memories, photos, some letters from Arturo, my wedding album, his old robe that still faintly smelled of his cologne and tobacco, the essentials. Daniel had kept everything else, the silver cutlery we chose together, the china we used on Sundays, Arturo's leather chair where he sat to read the newspaper. Suddenly, the rage crystallized into an idea. Lucid, cold, devastating. So absurd that for a second I thought I was going crazy, but then I looked at it head on, and I knew it was the only thing I could do. The only way for him to understand. The only way they couldn't keep anything else. The only way they couldn't profane even one more brick of our sanctuary. I walked determinedly toward the phone booth that still remained on the corner, the same one from where I called Arturo to tell him I was in labor. I took out my wallet. My trembling fingers found the worn card I had kept for years. Martinez Cranes and Demolition, 24-hour service. I dialed the number. Each tone sounded like a heartbeat, accelerated, furious. "Good evening, Martinez Cranes," said a rough voice with a worker's accent. "Good evening," I said, and my voice sounded strange, serene, as if it wasn't mine. "I need a service." "Tell me, ma'am, did your car break down?" "No. It's not a car. It's a house." A silence on the other end of the line. "A house, ma'am? You mean you have rubble to remove?" "No." I breathed deeply, fixing my gaze on the silhouette of my home against the orange sky. "I want you to demolish it, right now." "Ma'am, that's not something you do like that. You need permits, blueprints, an inspection. I'll pay you triple your usual rate, in cash. Right now," I insisted, and the tremor in my voice had disappeared, replaced by steel-like firmness. "It's a small house. One story, no one inside. I just want it to disappear." There was another silence. Longer. I could hear the murmur of a radio in the background and the sound of someone sipping coffee. "Are you sure, ma'am? It sounds like a family problem. We don't like trouble." "There will be no trouble." I lied shamelessly. "It's mine. The deed is in my name. Or it was. Until today. Please. It's important." I didn't beg. I ordered, with the same authority with which I asked Daniel to eat all his vegetables when he was little. The voice on the other end hesitated for another moment. "Give me the address." I gave it to him. Every number, every street, sounded like a tombstone over my own heart. "We'll be there in 40 minutes, but if there's any problem, we turn around, and payment in advance." "I'll be waiting." I hung up. The receiver crackled against my hand, which was gripping tightly. I leaned against the cold showcase of the booth, panting. What had I done? What was I becoming? But the image of Daniel closing the door, his impassive face, extinguished any hint of regret. I returned to my post on the sidewalk, in front of the house, and waited. The minutes dragged on. The sky was tinted purple and garnet. The living room lights came on. I saw Daniel's silhouette moving behind the curtains. He was in my living room, in my armchair, probably with my blanket over his legs. A powerful noise, a mechanical growl, broke the twilight. It appeared at the end of the street, monstrous, unnatural among the quiet suburban gardens. A large crane, with a wrecking ball hanging from its steel arm like a grotesque earring. It rolled heavily and stopped in front of the house, with a hiss of pneumatic brakes. The door opened and a big man in blue overalls and a baseball cap got out. He looked at me, then at the house, then back at me, an elderly woman with a suitcase, standing in the growing darkness. "You made the call?" he asked, incredulous. "Yes," I affirmed, walking toward him. "I'm Elena Mendoza." "Joaquin," he said, taking off his cap and scratching his head. "Look, Mrs. Mendoza, before doing anything foolish, are you absolutely sure that— Is it the payment?" I cut him off, opening my purse and taking out the bundle of bills I had withdrawn that same morning from the bank for the eviction, to start a new life. The irony burned my stomach. "Take it. Triple the rate, as we agreed." He looked at the money in his hand, as if it were a snake. "It's not just the money, ma'am. This is a house. Is there no one inside? Pets? Things?" "Nothing that matters anymore," I said, and my voice broke for the first time. Joaquin looked into my eyes. He searched for something: madness, drunkenness, but he only found a painful determination, a pain so deep it confused itself with sanity. He nodded slowly, with a heaviness I was grateful for. "Step back, then. This is going to make noise." It was at that moment when the front door burst open. Daniel came out like a bull, his face contorted in a mixture of confusion and anger. "What the hell is going on here? What is this contraption?" he shouted, addressing Joaquin. "Get off my property." Joaquin shrugged and pointed at me with his head. "The lady is the one paying." Daniel looked at me then. Really looked at me for the first time since he kicked me out. His eyes, so similar to his father's, opened with disbelief. "Mother? What are you doing? Are you crazy? Tell him to leave." "It's no longer your property, Daniel," I said, and my sound was so cold that even I shuddered. According to your papers, according to your inheritance, it's yours. But the foundations of this house I bought with my savings, with the money I earned, giving piano lessons, before your father and I got married. They're in my name. And I have decided I don't want them here. I want them back. He paled. He didn't expect this. He had read the big documents, but not the fine print, the history. That's nonsense. You can't do that. I already have, I said, turning toward Joaquin. Please proceed. No, wait. Daniel ran toward the crane, positioning himself between the ball and the house. This is my house. Everything. The papers say so. Everything, Daniel. I spat, and all my rage, my pain, my betrayal erupted like a geyser. Including this? I opened my suitcase with brusque movements and took out not a photo, not a letter, but a thick manila envelope, worn at the corners. I held it high like a talisman. Is this yours too? Because what was inside the house was yours. Well, take it. Read your damn papers. I threw it at his feet. The envelope landed on the wet grass. He looked at it, distrustful, not understanding. What is it? Read, I shouted, with a strength I didn't know I had. Read what your father really left you. The confusion on his face deepened. He looked down at the envelope, then at the crane, then at me. Joaquin, motionless, next to his machine, was the mute spectator of our drama, with clumsy movements, dominated by a rage that fought against a sprout of lethal curiosity. Daniel bent down and picked up the envelope. His fingers, long and thin like Arturo's, broke the seal brusquely. I held my breath. The world reduced to that piece of paper, to the dim twilight light that barely allowed us to see, to the purr of the crane, to my heart hammering in my ears. He pulled out a document, thicker than he expected. It wasn't the cold clauses of a will. It was cursive handwriting, elegant and so familiar from Arturo, pages and pages written by hand. A letter. The letter. Daniel began reading silently, his eyes racing through the lines hastily. I could see the words even though I was meters away, because I had read them 1,000 times, I had memorized them, they had been my comfort and my condemnation during all these months. My dear Daniel, if you are reading this, it's because I'm no longer here, and there are things a man must tell his son, things that sometimes pride or fear prevent us from saying in life. I saw how his angry frown began to soften, how his lips pressed in a thin line, parted, how his breathing, choppy from rage, became deeper, slower. This house, every brick, every crack, every memory it contains, is not just patrimony. It's your mother's sweat, her tears of joy the first time we entered, her sleepless nights taking care of you and then taking care of me. It's her strength, Daniel. Her love made concrete and beams. Daniel looked up for a second, looked at the house, and then returned to the paper. His hand began to tremble slightly. I leave you the property, yes, because you are my blood and my future. But I leave it to you with a condition, with a sacred mandate, that you take care of her, of the house, and of your mother. May they be your greatest treasure, because money is spent, things break, but this is your story. Our story. Don't abandon it. Don't throw it away. Don't let the cold world make you forget the warmth of this family. His eyes raced through the pages faster and faster, devouring the words, the confessions of his father, the advice, the anecdotes that revealed a depth Daniel never wanted to see. Arturo spoke to him not as to an heir, but as to a son. He pleaded with him, begged him, entrusted him with our protection. If you ever doubt, my son, remember this: the day you left for university, your mother sat on the stairs and cried, not from sadness, but from pride. And she kept your room exactly as you left it, because she said that way. When you returned, you would always feel that this was your home. A sob escaped Daniel's lips, muffled, hoarse. He brought a hand to his mouth. The paper crumpled in his fist. Don't let this become a simple transaction. Don't let the lawyer and the notary steal what really matters. Take care of your mother. Love her. Because she is the best of me that remains in this world, and the best of you too. Daniel couldn't continue reading. He looked up at me. Tears flooded his eyes, dragging with them the fury, the arrogance, the coldness. His face decomposed into a gesture of pure, childlike pain. He was my little boy again. the scared child who sought comfort in my arms. Mother, he managed to articulate, with a broken voice I barely recognized. I didn't know, he told me. The lawyer said that the will was clear, that everything was mine without conditions, and you didn't think to ask? I said, and my voice now did tremble, loaded with an emotion I could no longer contain. To come talk to me? To sit by my side and ask me what your father really wanted? What I wanted? Did you prefer to believe a stranger in an expensive suit than the memory of your own father? Than your mother? I got scared. He confessed, and it was the first truth that came out of his mouth in weeks. The mortgage, my debts, I thought it was the solution, that you would understand, that you could go to a nursing home, that you would be better off. Better off? The word came out like a whiplash. Better off away from your father's memories? Better off away from you? He lowered his head, ashamed. The document hung from his hand like a surrender flag. I'm sorry. My God, Mother, I'm sorry. I haven't been able to sleep. I haven't been able to think, since Dad left. Everything has fallen apart, and he swallowed saliva, struggling to form the words. I was afraid to fail, afraid of not being the man he expected. And instead of facing it, I hid behind papers and stupidities. Joaquin, from his crane, cleared his throat. Ma'am, do we proceed? Or... Daniel turned toward him, with panic in his eyes. No, please, no, stop, I beg you. Then he turned to me, pleading. Mother, please, stop him. Come in, please, talk to me, scream at me, hit me, whatever you want. But don't destroy our house. Don't destroy the only thing I have left. I looked at him. At my son, defeated, broken, repentant. The wrecking ball hung motionless, a frozen threat in time. The noise of the crane's engine was the only sound, a continuous bass that vibrated in the ground. Was this enough? Could a late repentance rebuild what had been broken? Could I forgive the pain of being thrown out of my own home? Tears returned to my eyes, but this time they weren't from rage or desperation. They were from an immense sorrow, for him, for me, for Arturo, who from somewhere would be watching us with his heart broken. I took a step forward, then another. My feet seemed to weigh a ton. I stopped in front of him. I raised my hand, and with a softness that contrasted with the violence of the moment, I took the document from his numb fingers. This letter, I said, caressing the paper, your father gave it to me a week before he died. He told me, give it to him when you think he has understood everything, or when you think he has forgotten everything. I didn't know when the moment would be. Today I knew it was today. He cried silently, tears streaking his face without shame. I have forgotten everything, Mother. Forgive me, please. The sound of a car braking abruptly made us both turn. A taxi stopped behind the crane, with a screech of tires. The back door opened, and an elderly woman, petite, with a beige coat and white hair gathered in an impeccable bun, got out with difficulty. She leaned on a cane and looked at the scene with a mixture of horror and determination. It was Clara, my mother-in-law, Arturo's mother. Her face, furrowed by the wrinkles of her 80-something years, was pale. Her eyes, still lively and sharp, swept over the crane, the wrecking ball, Joaquin with his cap in hand, Daniel crying like a child, and me standing in the middle of the chaos with Arturo's letter pressed against my chest. What barbarism is this? She exclaimed, and her voice, though tremulous with age, had an authority that cut through the tension like a knife. Daniel, Elena, have you gone mad? I got off the plane and the taxi driver told me there was a crane at my address. What is happening here? Daniel wiped his tears with his sleeve, ashamed that his grandmother saw him like this. Grandma. Clara didn't pay attention to him. She approached me, limping slightly, and took my hand. Her fingers, cold and full of blue veins, squeezed mine with surprising strength. Elena, dear, are you okay? What is this machine doing here? Before I could answer, her gaze fell on the document I was holding. Her eyes opened slowly, with instant recognition. My God, she whispered. It's Arturo's letter. Have you given it to him? I nodded, unable to speak. She closed her eyes for a second, as if an old pain pierced through her. Then she looked at Daniel with infinite sorrow. "Have you read it, child?" she asked, her voice now soft, maternal. Daniel nodded, unable to articulate a word. Clara sighed, a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of all generations. "I asked him to," she said, addressing me, "but so Daniel could hear. I asked Arturo to. I told him, 'Write what you feel, son, because that stubborn and proud boy of yours is like his grandfather, and one day when you're not here, he'll need to hear your voice in the clearest way possible.' But I never imagined this." She turned toward the crane, toward Joaquin, who observed the scene with palpable discomfort. "Young man," Clara said, with absolute dignity, "thank you very much for your time. We no longer need your services. You may go. We'll pay for your trip. Of course." Joaquin looked toward me, seeking confirmation. I nodded slowly. He shrugged, relieved, got into the crane and with a roar began to fold the mechanical arm. The wrecking ball, which had been about to erase our past, retreated. The machine turned around and drove away down the street, leaving a sudden and deafening silence in its wake. The three of us stood there, under the now completely dark sky, illuminated only by the porch light, the grandfather, the mother and the son, the 3 points of a broken triangle. Clara broke the silence. "Well," she said, gripping her cane, "we're not going to solve anything here with the dew wetting our bones. Daniel, pick up your mother's suitcase." Daniel looked at me, a mute question, pleading, in his swollen eyes. Would I allow him to do it? Would I allow him to cross that threshold again? I looked at the house, our house, full of cracks, memories, love and pain. Then I looked at my son, destroyed, repentant, trying to find his way home. And I looked at Clara, the matriarch, who had traveled God knows how to arrive on time, to be the witness we needed. It wasn't an ending. It was a new beginning. A painful one, full of scars to heal and words to say, but it was a beginning. I nodded, very slightly. Daniel, with a quick, almost desperate movement, grabbed the handle of my suitcase. His fingers brushed mine. An electric contact, the first in months that wasn't of resentment. "Come on," Clara said, taking command. "Inside, we need to put the kettle on. And this time, Daniel, you'll serve." And taking a hesitant step, followed by a son who was no longer a man, but a lost child, and by a daughter-in-law who carried the weight of betrayed love, Clara opened the house door, the same door that hours before had closed with a slam. Now it opened with a familiar creak, inviting us to enter, to face the ghosts, to rebuild, from the foundations, what the cold world had tried to demolish. The creak of the door opening sounded different this time. It wasn't the cheerful and anticipated sound of someone coming home after a long day, nor the tired whisper of routine. It was a grave, expectant sound, like that of a tomb being opened to allow the living to face their dead. The threshold I had crossed 1,000 times with the shopping bag, in a hurry, with Arturo holding my hand, now seemed like an invisible border between two worlds, the one before the slam and the one after. Clara entered first, her cane hitting the tile floor with a firmness that belied her fragility. She was the anchor, the compass in our particular storm. Daniel stayed at the threshold, holding my suitcase with one hand and rubbing the other against his pants, nervous, as if he feared staining the purity of a place from which he had been expelled by his own stupidity. I entered last. The air inside the house hit me. It smelled clean, of bleach, of a pine air freshener I never liked. Daniel had cleaned, had erased the smells of our life, the morning coffee aroma, the slight smell of humidity from old books, the ghost of Arturo's pipe tobacco that refused to disappear from the armchair. "Well, we won't stand in the hallway like ghosts," Clara declared, hanging her coat on the coat rack that Arturo made with oak branches. "The kitchen, that's where important things have always been fixed in this family." She walked ahead, knowing every inch of the house she had visited religiously every Sunday for 40 years. Daniel and I followed her in uncomfortable silence, the sound of our steps absorbed by the worn hallway carpet. He carried my suitcase as if it contained explosives, with a mixture of reverence and fear. The kitchen was impeccable, too tidy. The copper pots I liked to hang shone absent. The pine table, full of knife scars and hot coffee cup marks, gleamed with a layer of wax that made it look fake, like a museum piece. Daniel had converted our living space into a catalog photo. Clara headed to the cupboard with the authority of someone who had always had their place there. She took out the old blue porcelain teapot, the one we used on special occasions or in great sorrows. "Daniel," she said, without looking at him, placing the teapot on the counter. "Water. And light the fire. Not that modern electric thing, the gas one, like your father did." Daniel nodded, mute, and moved like an automaton. He opened the faucet, filled the teapot. His hands, those hands that had signed papers to evict me, trembled slightly as he lit the burner. The blue flame jumped with a soft whoosh, a familiar sound that made something shudder inside me. I sat in one of the table chairs, feeling the cold wood through my pants fabric. I gripped the backrest, my knuckles whitening. Clara took out 3 cups and the tea set that Arturo and I bought on a trip to London. We never used it. It was always saved for a special occasion. I suppose this was one, however terrible it was. "Elena," Clara placed her hand on mine, interrupting my fierce grip. "Breathe, dear. The world doesn't end because a man, even if he's your son, commits the stupidity of his life." Her touch was surprisingly warm. I looked at her. Her eyes, the same hazel color as Arturo's, watched me with a tenderness that disarmed me. "He threw me out, Clara," I whispered, and my voice sounded like a wounded kitten. "He threw me out of my house." "I know," she nodded, with infinite sadness. "And he has been the biggest idiot this family has ever birthed. And look, his grandfather, may he rest in peace, did some things, but this takes the cake." Daniel, who was with his back to us watching the water, shrank his shoulders as if he had been whipped. Silence again took over the room, broken only by the crackling of the flame and the slight whistle that the teapot began to emit. Daniel moved, clumsy, looking for the tea bags. He searched in the wrong cupboard. "To the left, Daniel," I said, unable to help it. "In the chicken-shaped tin. They've always been there." He froze for a second. A spasm of pain ran down his back. Then he nodded and opened the correct cupboard. He found the tin, the ceramic chicken. Kitsch, ugly, that I adored and embarrassed Arturo. Daniel held it in his hands, looking at it as if it were an artifact from another civilization. The teapot's whistle became sharp, demanding. Daniel started and turned off the fire. He took the teapot with a cloth, the same worn and soft kitchen cloth we had always used, and brought it to the table. The steam rose in ghost spirals, slightly fogging the air between us. He sat down. For the first time, the 3 of us were around the table, Clara at the head, like a benevolent judge, Daniel and I facing each other, like adversaries in a duel from which we had both emerged wounded. No one touched their cup. "Well," Clara said, serving the tea with a steady hand, "let's start at the beginning. Daniel." "Why?" Daniel lowered his gaze to his cup. The steam caressed his face, but he seemed frozen. "The lawyer? Mr. Rivas?" He swallowed saliva. "After the funeral, he called me to his office. He told me the will was clear and irrevocable, that the house, all the properties, everything, passed to my name, that it was my responsibility, and that sometimes, in these cases, the most sensible thing was to free elderly family members from burdens, that nursing homes nowadays are wonderful, that it was what Dad would have wanted, a clean transition." "And you believed him?" I asked, unable to contain the tremor of rage in my voice. That vulture in an expensive suit who didn't even come to the funeral. Without consulting me? Without showing me the papers? He showed me the will. He looked up, desperate. It was signed by Dad. It was legal. And I— "You what, Daniel?" Clara pressed, her voice soft but implacable. "I was afraid," he exploded, hitting the table with his palm. The cups trembled, the tea stirred. "Afraid of everything, of the mortgage that Dad had renegotiated, and that's due in 6 months, of my company debts, of not being able to maintain this, of disappointing him. He made everything so easy, he was so strong, and I'm not him, I'm a disaster." His words came out in torrents, interrupted by sobs he could no longer contain. He brought his hands to his face, hunching over the table as if his stomach hurt. "I thought if I fixed everything quickly, if you went to a safe place, if I sold the house and paid off the debts, then I could breathe. I could be the man I was supposed to be, but it was just a facade. a shitty facade. The crudeness of his words, so out of place in his always measured mouth, impacted me. I saw him there, collapsed, and a part of me, the maternal part, wanted to hug him, tell him everything would be okay. But the other part, the wounded part, was still bleeding. "And at no point did you think of me?" I asked, and my voice was barely a thread. "Of my pain? That I had just lost your father? That this was all I had left? That he promised he would take care of me?" He shook his head, without removing his hands from his face. "I saw you strong. You've always been the strong one, Mother. The one who endured everything with Dad, who didn't cry in front of anyone. I thought that you would overcome it. That you were made of different stuff." "I'm made of the same stuff as you, Daniel," I said, and a hot tear fell into my teacup, without making noise. "I break the same way." Clara let out a long and tired sigh. "Mr. Rivas," she said, and there was a hint of ice in her voice, "has always been an ambitious man. Arturo didn't like him, but he was the company lawyer. He must have seen a juicy commission in selling a property like this, and a vulnerable, grieving son was easy prey." "What?" Daniel removed his hands from his face. His eyes were red, bewildered. "A commission?" "Of course, idiot," Clara said, without any consideration. "Do you think those men give a damn about your clean transition? They care about percentages. He would flatter you, tell you that you were an intelligent businessman, that you were making the difficult but correct decisions. Am I wrong?" Daniel paled. It was exactly what had happened. You could read it on his face, in the horror of realizing he had been manipulated, that his supposed strength had been, in reality, enormous naivety. "He told me that it was what Dad would have done, that he didn't cling to sentimentalism." "Nonsense." Clara hit the floor with her cane. "Arturo was the most sentimental man I've known. He cried at commercials about lost puppies. He kept this dummy's baby teeth in a little box." She pointed at Daniel with her head. "That will he showed you must be the first one, the one he made when the company was doing poorly and he was afraid of leaving us in ruin. But then he made another one, after the first diagnosis, when things became clear." Daniel and I stared at her. "Another will?" I asked, confused. Of course, Clara drank a sip of tea, as if she were revealing the weather forecast. "He asked me to be a witness. He signed it here at this same table, on a rainy afternoon. He said, 'Mom, this is what I really want, and in that will, Elena, the house is yours. Lifelong, usufruct. And Daniel gets the company shares and investments, which are more than enough to pay any stupid debt he may have contracted.'" The air was expelled from my lungs. Daniel was left open-mouthed, like a fish out of water. "And Dalzin, and why?" he stammered. "Why didn't you know?" "Because Arturo was stubborn and proud, like you. He wanted you to choose to do the right thing, to take care of your mother out of love, not legal obligation. The other will, the real one, should only be opened if you proved not to be up to the task." Clara looked at me, and for the first time I saw tears in her eyes. "He made me promise I wouldn't say anything, that he trusted his son. And I trusted, until the taxi driver told me about the crane, and I knew everything had gone wrong." The silence that followed was absolute. You could hear the tick-tock of the cuckoo clock that Arturo adored and Daniel always found tacky. The world had turned upside down again. Daniel's betrayal was suddenly deeper and more foolish than I had ever imagined, and at the same time, more understandable. He had been a pawn in a game he didn't understand, manipulated by his pain and another's greed. Daniel got up from the chair so abruptly that it fell backwards with a dry crash that made Clara and me jump. He brought his hands to his head, walking back and forth in the kitchen like a caged beast.